The wine loosened Emma up, and she completely lost control of herself, trusting the experienced Mitchell. Mitchell confidently picked Emma up and sat her on the kitchen table. A second later, he roughly... The rain in Seattle hadn't stopped all day, a soft, steady mist that turned the streets silver and made the city lights blur like watercolor. Emma stood under the awning of a quiet bar, clutching her coat tighter around her. She glanced up just as Mitchell pulled his truck to the curb. He stepped out with that easy confidence she had noticed the first time they met. Tall, broad, with a bit of grey at his temples and a roughness to him that her husband would never have. Mitchell's smile was small, knowing as he opened the passenger door and waited for her. Without a word, Emma climbed in, the warmth of the truck wrapping around her. Mitchell's hand brushed her knee as he shifted the truck into drive. A small touch, but it sent a shiver racing up her spine. She stared straight ahead, heart hammering, pulse loud in her ears. They didn't speak much on the drive. They didn't have to. Everything had already been said in the lingering glances at family dinners, the 2 long brushes of hands passing dishes, the quiet, loaded smiles when no one else was looking. Mitchell lived on the edge of the city, in a small house tucked into the trees. As they pulled up, the porch light glowed against the dark, the only bright spot in the misty night. Inside, the house smelled like cedar and something warm. Emma stood awkwardly near the door while Mitchell poured 2 glasses of whiskey. He handed one to her, their fingers brushing again, deliberate this time, lingering just a second too long. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice low and rough, and clinked his glass against hers. Emma laughed softly, a nervous sound, and sipped. The whiskey burned a trail down her throat, sharp and thrilling. Mitchell leaned against the counter, his eyes never leaving her. "You know why you're here," he said. Emma set her glass down carefully. She could feel the tension between them, thick and electric, pressing against her skin like a living thing. She crossed the room slowly, each step deliberate, her heart racing harder with every inch she closed. Mitchell straightened, his body tense, his hands gripping the counter behind him. When she was close enough to feel the heat radiating off him, she reached up and brushed her fingers lightly along his jaw. His stubble scratched her skin in a way that made her stomach twist with need. Mitchell caught her wrist gently, his thumb stroking the inside of her arm. For a long, loaded second, he just looked at her, as if giving her one last chance to walk away. Emma didn't move. Mitchell pulled her into him, his hands sliding up her sides, strong and sure. His mouth found hers, the kiss slow at first, tasting, testing. She melted into him, her hands gripping the front of his shirt, pulling him closer, desperate for more. The kiss deepened, roughened, until there was no space left between them. Mitchell's hands roamed her back, her waist, his touch firm, possessive, setting her entire body alight. He lifted her effortlessly, setting her on the kitchen counter, stepping between her legs, his hands anchoring her there. Emma wrapped her arms around his neck, her body arching against him, needing the connection, the heat, the reality of him. Mitchell broke the kiss long enough to rest his forehead against hers, both of them breathing hard. His hands tightened on her thighs and he let out a low, rough laugh. "This is wrong," he muttered. Emma pressed her mouth to his jaw, feeling the heat of his skin under her lips. "Then why does it feel so right?" Mitchell growled low in his throat and kissed her again, harder this time, his hands moving over her body with a hunger that made her tremble. She gave herself over to it, to him, losing herself in the overwhelming rush of desire, the undeniable pull that had been simmering between them for far too long. The rain outside grew heavier, beating against the windows, but neither of them heard it anymore. There was only this moment, only them. Mitchell lifted her from the counter with an ease that made Emma's heart race even faster. His hands were steady, his body sure, like he had waited years for this moment and wasn't willing to waste a second. He carried her through the darkened house, the rain casting shifting patterns across the walls. They reached the bedroom, and Mitchell kicked the door open with his foot, never loosening his hold on her. Emma clung to him, her fingers digging into his shoulders, her body alive under his touch. He set her down at the edge of the bed, his eyes burning into hers. Without a word, he pulled her into another kiss, deeper, harder, pouring everything he had into it. His hands framed her face, then slid down her sides, memorizing her, learning her. Emma shivered under the slow drag of his fingertips across the thin fabric of her dress. She helped him peel off his shirt, running her hands over the solid warmth of his chest, the firm muscles under his skin. Mitchell caught her wrist again, his touch gentle but commanding, lifting her hand to his mouth and pressing a kiss to her palm. A slow, devastating gesture that made her knees weaken. He pulled her closer, his hands slipping under the hem of her dress, dragging it up slowly, exposing inch after inch of her skin. The way he looked at her, so hungry, so reverent, made her breath catch in her throat. Emma stood there, trembling slightly, her dress slipping to the floor. Mitchell's gaze traced every line of her, his chest rising and falling with rough, shallow breaths. He reached for her, pulling her against him, his hands sliding along her bare back, their bodies pressed together, heat blooming between them, overwhelming and beautiful. Mitchell kissed her again, slower this time, savoring her, his hands moving with a patient, aching tenderness. His mouth traced a path down her neck, across her shoulder, sending waves of heat through her. Emma tilted her head back, surrendering to every kiss, every touch. When he finally lifted her onto the bed, it wasn't rushed. It was careful, deliberate, as if he was handling something rare, something he didn't want to break. Emma reached for him, her hands roaming over his body, feeling the strength of him, the need he was barely holding back. Mitchell groaned softly against her skin, pressing kisses along her collarbone, her chest, her ribs, worshipping her with his mouth and his hands. The connection between them was undeniable, a deep pull that went beyond just need. It was raw, electric, something neither of them could resist anymore. He moved over her, his hands bracing on either side of her, his forehead resting against hers. For a moment, they just breathed each other in, the world narrowing to the space between their bodies. "You're beautiful," he whispered, his voice rough, almost broken. His thumb brushed along her cheek and Emma felt the burn of tears behind her eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming tenderness of it all. Mitchell kissed her again, slower this time, as if trying to memorize her taste, her feel, the way she trembled under him. His hands mapped every inch of her body with aching thoroughness, drawing soft gasps and whispered moans from her lips. Emma's fingers threaded through his hair, pulling him closer, needing more, needing all of him. Their bodies moved together naturally, like they had always been meant for this, like the world had been holding its breath, waiting for them to find each other. Every touch, every kiss, every slow, grinding movement built the fire higher, hotter, until it consumed them both. Emma clung to him, lost in the heat, the emotion, the incredible rightness of it all. When the final wave of pleasure crashed over her, she cried out softly against his mouth, her whole body shuddering with release. Mitchell held her through it, whispering her name against her skin, anchoring her even as she fell apart in his arms. They collapsed together onto the bed, tangled in the sheets, their bodies slick with sweat, their hearts pounding in the same frantic rhythm. Outside, the rain finally softened, a quiet whisper against the windows. Inside, there was only the sound of their breathing, the slow, steady return to something that felt like peace. Mitchell brushed his lips against Emma's forehead, her cheeks, her mouth, as if he couldn't stop touching her, couldn't believe she was real. And Emma, wrapped in his arms, knew without doubt she had found something she could never walk away from. The bedroom was bathed in a soft, muted light as the storm outside began to fade, leaving behind only the occasional drip of water from the roof. Emma lay against Mitchell's chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns across his skin. His hand moved slowly up and down her back, each pass grounding her deeper into the quiet intimacy they now shared. Neither of them spoke. There was no need, Everything had been said in the way their bodies came together, in every touch, every kiss, every trembling breath. Mitchell shifted slightly, tilting her chin up to meet his gaze. His thumb brushed over her lower lip, and Emma caught his hand with hers, pressing a kiss to his palm. The tenderness of the moment wrapped around her like a second skin, filling all the empty spaces inside her she hadn't realized were still aching. "You're something I didn't know I needed," Mitchell said, his voice low, rough, full of emotion. Emma smiled, her heart squeezing tight in her chest. She reached up and threaded her fingers through his hair, pulling him down for a slow, lingering kiss. His mouth moved against hers with a kind of desperate sweetness, as if he was afraid she might slip away if he let go. But she wasn't going anywhere. Mitchell gathered her closer, tucking her under his chin. One hand splayed across the small of her back. His other hand found hers between them, their fingers locking together naturally, instinctively. Emma closed her eyes, listening to the steady beat of his heart beneath her ear. It was a sound she knew she could fall asleep to every night for the rest of her life. Time passed slowly, sweetly. The world beyond the rain-streaked windows faded into a distant hum, unimportant and forgotten. Here in this bed, in these arms, Emma found something she hadn't dared hope for. A love that was fierce, messy, and completely real. Mitchell kissed the top of her head, his stubble rough against her skin. "Stay," he murmured, the word a quiet plea. Emma answered by curling tighter against him, her hand squeezing his. She didn't need to say the words. He could feel her answer in the way she held onto him, in the way her body molded perfectly to his. Eventually, hunger and laughter tugged them out of bed. Wrapped in nothing but a blanket, Emma padded into the kitchen, Mitchell close behind her. He pulled open the fridge, muttering about finding something edible, and she leaned against the counter, watching him with a smile that felt different now. Deeper, freer. He handed her a leftover piece of pizza with a smirk, and she took it, laughing as he stole a bite before she could. Their laughter filled the small kitchen, echoing off the walls, warm and real. Emma perched on the counter again, Mitchell standing between her legs just like before, but everything was different now. His hands rested on her hips, his forehead pressed lightly to hers, their bodies swaying gently to the invisible rhythm between them. "You realize," Mitchell said, his voice teasing, "we're in a hell of a lot of trouble." Emma grinned, tipping her head back to look at him properly. "Worth it." Mitchell chuckled, low and rough, and kissed her again, slow and unhurried, like they had all the time in the world. The storm had passed. In its place, something stronger had taken root. Something that didn't need permission, didn't need explaining. They would figure out the rest later. The chaos, the consequences, the hard conversations waiting back in the real world. They would come. But not yet. Tonight belonged to them. And as Mitchell lifted her into his arms once more, carrying her back toward the warm, tangled bed, Emma knew that whatever storms waited beyond this night, they would face them together, reckless, fearless, and completely, utterly in love.